Perfect.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Quarantine Grilling with McGee and Carney. I am one of your hosts, one part of the dynamic duo today, Jonathan Carney, and with me today is Brian McGee. Now, most of you may know us from the cigar world. Most of you also may know that we are big into the food world. So we're going to bring a little bit of each to this today, but mostly we're going to bring the food world to you. So I introduce you, as I said, to my co-host, Brian McGee, Quarantine Grilling. Brian, how you doing today?
What's up, brother? How you doing? Oh, by the way, I just wanted to point out that I've got the championship belt here, so you can drool over it. You know, because I won that, if you remember.
I can't see that through the stars and stripes, Brian. So, for those of you, as I said, that are aware of our food exploits on the road, Brian and I did compete in a steak cooking contest. And this is really where, I think for me, where the idea to do this quarantine grilling came from, because we'd had a few other events that we were going to do together. Some of them were coming up sooner, some were coming up later. And this kind of put a halt on all of that. And as we're sitting here, obviously you and I are just dynamic together in general. But
Right.
Incredibly electric. So this was a great opportunity for us to kind of bring some of the information that we have, some of the love that we have to everyone else that hasn't got to experience one of our cooking events. I think it was a natural progression with what's going on in the world right now. A little bit of some enjoyment and steak that we can bring to everybody will maybe give you all a little bit of a moment to sit and relax. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Brian.
No, I agree with it. Look, as a rep, you know, you can only make so many calls a day and talk to the same people. And, you know, right now you're just reaching out and touching base and seeing how people are doing. But you need a little break every once in a while, do something a little fun. And if you got to be by yourself, why not grill something and smoke something good while you're doing it?
Absolutely. So a couple items I want to touch on just so people know the format of our show. This is the first of hopefully many of these. Hopefully we can start doing some of these in other locales rather than just in our homes. I don't know what the weather situation's like where you're at, Brian, but it's snowing where I'm at up here in Maine.
60 degrees and about to start raining here in a minute. So
what we'd like to do for our show here, we're going to give you all a little bit of history on ourselves, a little bit of knowledge as we go through and we start cooking here of why we cook the way we cook. I think my technique's obviously better than Brian's, but he has a championship belt hanging off his freaking green egg over there. So who am I to talk? I don't have my championship belt yet. But we'll be talking a lot of that. But first, we're going to introduce what we're going to be cooking. Next, we'll get into the cooking and we'll have some banter back and forth. We anticipate going about an hour and a half. And then after this is over, we're going to do an open session where I can share the link to some people who want to join us possibly on Zoom, where we can answer some questions and have a hangout. And that's where we'll really bring the cigar side into it. For me, cigars are, I smoke while I'm cooking most of the time when I'm and the cigars for me though when I'm eating is something that I enjoy after I'm done eating too. So we'll be doing a little cigar lounge after this in the Zoom if anybody wants to come in. We will not be talking politics. There will be none of that on this show. We will be talking red meat. We'll be talking white meat. We'll be talking orange and pink and purple meat.
Right.
I will be cooking vegetables today as well. But I just want to lay out what this is about. This is about a fun time. This is about enjoying our friendship, and two, enjoying fine cuts of meat and the technique of cooking it.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely unless it's just the politics of the way you cook something. But obviously, we do it the right way.
So I do have some sponsors here. Bear with me. This is a very low-tech group. And by group, I mean me, very, very low-tech on this end as your host. But we do have some sponsors here. Our first sponsor is obviously La Flor Dominicana, La Flor Dominicana Cigars. One of the Dominican's finest, fullest-bodied cigars out there. I coincidentally work for them as well. I'm trying to go full screen here. But there we go, LFD Cigars. One of our other sponsors is the Wood Butcher of Maine. For those of you that follow me on social media, you see a lot of my woodwork and boards I have are from a close friend of mine who has a company called Wood Butcher. He's an actual butcher. We'll probably have him on the show sometime, Brian.
Yeah, well, good.
But he makes some great blocks, so you'll get to see some of my food displayed on that, and you'll see those around. Our next sponsor is our friends at Crown Heads Cigars. Hopefully you can see that. We had some challenges with that, but Brian works for Crown Heads. He covers like 97 states. He's all over the place. So Crown Heads is one of the sponsors here, and Crown Heads is also the sponsor of the McGee's Meet and Greets that
Yes.
we do. So if you want to just briefly explain what your meet and greet is, that would be really interesting. It's definitely something fascinating to attend.
Basically, I do events in my territory where a lot of our events are called meet and greets, but I call them meet and greets, MEAT. Where if you buy a box of cigars at one of my events, I cook you a steak. So I bring a grill, I sous vide the steaks. Buy your box, you get one of the limited edition hats, lighter, and your choice of meat and how you want it cooked. I think last year I cooked just over 700 steaks.
700, that's ridiculous. Now, the last sponsors we wanted to feature, one of the most common questions I get asked is, where did you pick this meat up? Where did you get it at? Now, I travel quite a bit, so a lot of mine I do a good amount of mail order. Brian has some great butchers locally that he purchases from. But let me set up a share here so you can see the screen. So my beef I'm going to be cooking today. Today I'm going to be cooking a 70-day dry-aged bone-in New York strip. It's prime. That one came from Pat LaFrida Meats, and that's in New Jersey. It's one of the purveyors for some of the high-end steakhouses, one around the world in the country, but specifically in New York City. They are one of the choice meat purveyors for Peter Luger's. They also supply meat for many other steakhouses around the city. One of the more unique ones for me in New York City is this restaurant and steakhouse called the Beatrice Inn. But Pat LaFrida is where I get most of my dry aging. I'll show you the marbling after that. But I'll be cooking the 70-day dry age bone-in New York strip prime. Going to have a lot of funk to it. And then I'm also cooking from Fossil Farms. If you've been following me the last week or so, I'm going to be cooking a yak New York strip. So a farm-raised yak, the same cut as the beef I'm going to be using. But I'll talk as we get into that a little bit of the differences for that. But Brian, what are you going to be cooking today?
Well, I'll show them here before I put them on. I'll be reverse searing what I'm doing today. I don't know if you can see right here. I've got Wagyu hamburger, Italian sausage, Wagyu tri-tip, and some asparagus. So I'm going to smoke them first, and then hopefully they'll be done by the time we're done. And then I'll let my grill get up really hot and put a nice sear on everything and be ready to go.
Excellent. And Brian picked that up. What was the meat purveyor that you used for this?
Local Yokel. It's a shop here in McKinney. They do ship. They do 44 Farms, which is a Texas ranch. And they also do, I believe they also do Snake River. But I get a lot of my meat from Local Yokel. They've got some really choice selection. They do Angus, Wagyu, pork. They do sausage, dairy, chicken, you name it, you can get it there.
I'm just checking in here, making sure we're actually live. I'm always wary on these types of things,
Right.
especially when it's just the two of us. The only feedback I have is you and me. And I've known sometimes where, like, if I disconnect on a telephone, I'll just keep on talking, and I have
Right.
no idea what's going on. So I've been trying to check my phone because I'm paranoid that it's stopped on the Facebook Live. But it is live. It looks good. You
Yeah.
and I are in HD. I think we're in HD.
That's scary. All right, I'm gonna dump these real quick.
Perfect. So what are you using for tell us a little bit more about your technique. You're doing a smoke first, and then I see you got some
Yeah.
cold working there.
So I've got some natural lump. It's called I've never used it before. It's called Jealous Devil, because he's jealous how hot it burns. And what I'm gonna do, I've got my chimney, barbecue dragon. Chimney's hot. I'm gonna drop the coals, and then I'm gonna cover it with moored lump, so it's slow to heat, and that'll keep my ambient temperature about 250 to 300, and give everything time to smoke before I sear it.
So if there's one thing you notice as a audience member here, one thing you're going to notice real quick is that Brian and I cook really, really different. I cook very hot, very, very high heat for short periods of time. And I try to get it as hot as humanly possible. So I do more of a tempered cooking technique where Brian does a smoke, and then he does a reverse sear. Now I will reverse sear. Sometimes I do reverse sear. I will reverse sear if I'm doing a cast iron. But where it comes in with my cast iron is it's seared first, then I let it rest for an extended period of time, then I put it in the oven, and then I'll bring it out and let it rest for another extended period of time, and then I will sear it again. So when I reverse sear, it's kind of like a double reverse sear. But
Yeah,
what
so
I'm preparing
now,
oh, go ahead.
I'll get my heat going at the end. I'll get mine at like 800, 900 degrees at the end.
So I'm working my meat with heat throughout the entire process, extreme heat. So
Right.
it cannot be hot enough. And
Here you
people
go,
are like,
Carney.
oh, what's the perfect temperature? Oh, that's gorgeous.
Look at the marbling on this tri-tip, or on this Kanya.
Picanha is one of my favorite cuts of meat. The fat on it's just amazing. It makes me want to be South American so badly. I know I can get it here and I eat it regularly here, but it's just not the same, I think, as if it's part of your culture.
This is Italian sausage.
Beautiful. So what I'm doing here, it's down below the screen. This is my 70-day bone-in New York strip. That Wagyu's amazing.
Woof.
Beautiful. Tons of marbling on this. This would be, if you classified this, they're classifying this as prime. The marbling on this is well above prime. Prime is essentially the highest grading. If you say, oh, this is higher than prime, there is no USDA rating higher than prime. There is American Wagyu, there's American Kobe, there's Japanese Kobe, Japanese Wagyu. But if you looked at this and you were to classify this individually, this would be classified as above prime rating, which simply means that it would be USDA would declare this prime. But Pat LaFrieda's got some really great stuff. Now I'm just using basically for seasoning on mine, Brian. I'm not sure what you're using, but my cooking technique and my preparing technique, seasoning technique is very basic. I like to cook great ingredients and cook them properly and let them stand out. So today, for the seasoning we're going to be using on this steak is simply olive oil, and I'm using pink Himalayan sea salt, and it's pretty fine ground. And this would be a more of an Italian style of seasoning with the olive oil. I just think it really brings out the quality of the steak, and when you use a great cut of meat or high quality.
No, I agree with you.
One of the reasons why I don't like smoking meat, his own.
Yeah, when you use high quality stuff, you don't need to trick it up. What I do is I I usually season mine 24 hours ahead of time and I seal them up. So I use kosher salt, cracked black pepper, and granulated garlic. That's all I put on mine. And then I let them sit for at least 12 hours, if I can, 24 hours before I cook them.
Now with a reverse sear that you're doing with the smoking before, I would venture to say one of the reasons I stay away from garlic and pepper is because I'm using high heat consistently throughout the whole process. Like this steak's
Right.
going to take almost a good hour and 20 minutes of the show, which is going to go on here shortly. But it's going to take a good hour and 20 minutes, a big thick cut. It's almost 2 inches thick. If I put pepper and garlic on that and then I put it on 1,000-degree flame or 800, 900-degree flame, you're going to get a burned pepper and a burned garlic
Right.
taste. It's awful. I think that would take away the aging technique that you use there. So I like using just lump charcoal, olive oil, the salt, and let the meat speak through, especially the way that I cook with a high heat. Pepper, salt, garlic, herbs, spices, just not needed. It's just going to burn off, and then anything burnt usually tastes a little off. But it's the smoking technique you're using is really when you can get in some crazy seasonings.
Yeah. Now, to your point, one thing I have learned is if you do season with salt or with garlic and with pepper, especially on high heat, if you're turning it less and the way you do it, if you turn it before 2 minutes, that pepper and garlic will not burn. It takes it 2 minutes to reach that temperature where it does burn. You get that foul taste. So as long as you're flipping it, I do mine every minute when I start to sear. That way you won't get that burn or that char from the seasoning.
So the seasoning stuff's important. We're on to that. I just threw the dry aged bone-in strip on. I like bone-in on the grill. One of the main reasons with that is it gives you essentially a third side that you can cook the steak on. That side being where the bone's at, and it can take a lot of heat through the bone, which is great because you want it to be as evenly cooked as possible. But I threw the bone-in strip, the bone-in New York strip on first. It's thick. This is about 23 ounces. The next one I have to compare it with, the reason I picked the yak is because yak in any farm-raised game or wild game tends to be very lean. As you can see the difference here, if you look, there's absolutely no marbling in here. It's just all muscle. It's what I used to be like 2 months ago. Now I'm a little soft. But but there's no marbling. So I picked this to compare, just one in appearance and two the cooking style. And I think you and I talked about this, Brian, about how when you cook wild game or farm raised game and pieces of meat that don't have a lot of fat in it and not a lot of marbling, one of the things you're doing when you're cooking a steak or meat that has a lot of fat in it is you're breaking down the fat. So that takes some time to get through the fibers and whatnot. So with the wild game and farm raised game, it just doesn't cook as long and it can't take as much heat because there's not as much to break down to enhance the flavor. So if you overcook a farm raised game, your flavor is going to be way off.
Right.
So I got this New York strip on first and the yaks and go on later.
Yeah, and I got I use these temperature probes. I don't know if anybody called meter. So right now the internal tip of that picanha is 51 degrees. I got it set for 130, and right now my ambient temperature inside the grill is 160, and it's climbing. It'll climb to about 275, 300, and then it'll give me a time how long it's going to take for it to cook. And it hits that temperature, and I'll let it rest, and then do what you do. I'll put that high heat sear on it.
The other thing that's rising in here is my heart rate because I'm about to have a stroke because I'm hosting a show with someone that uses temperature probes.
I'm a perfectionist, man.
So I don't like using temperature probes. I like to do freestyle everything.
Maybe you should use a temperature probe. I'm just saying.
However, I will admit when I eat at other steakhouses or I eat at other places or if I eat other people's food, one of my favorite people's food to eat is Brian's because it's always cooked absolutely perfect how I like it. And also my favorite steakhouse in the country, it's in New Orleans. It's called Doris Metropolitan. Incredible dining experience. They sous vide everything. So everybody's like, oh, you talk so bad about sous vide and dry smoking and this and that. And they're like, your favorite steakhouse is sous vide. I'm like, because they can't cook it right anywhere I go. So I appreciate it. And I do have a lot of respect for the sous vide and the dry smoking, but I will continue to make fun of it. I promise that too.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
So what are you smoking there for a cigar, Brian? I don't want to get too into it, but I'm asking you because I'm actually smoking something I want to talk about a little bit.
I'm actually smoking one of my daily, everyday smokes, the Lamperiosa that we make. It's just a cigar I smoke at least once a day. Uh-oh.
I lit up. The offices can wait, right? The cigar I picked up today it's one of my last ones. I had 5 of these. It was a cigar that I blended. I'm not a cigar blender and I'm not a cigar maker by any means, but I did do a basic tasting seminar down in the Dominican Republic last year with our sales team, and we all put together our own blend. And this is 100% Dominican wrapper, binder, filler. I can't remember the entire blend. I do know that the Kappa, the wrapper, is Habano 2000 that we grow, and I do know that the binder is Criollo 99. So this is a cigar. I have one of them left. Somebody stole the ones I made this year. I know who they are, and when I find you, you will have hell to pay. But the one I had from last year in 2018, beginning of 2019, end of 2018, was something I found in my humidor, and I said this would be a perfect thing to smoke on our inaugural show. All right, so the big difference that you're seeing right now is the different cooking technique. Obviously, if you guys can see my grill here, I hope you guys can see what's going on. I've got a big cut of meat, and I'm working it right now. And I've done one side. The first side of it was on there for probably about 2.5 minutes. The first sear that I give it will be the longest. It can take a lot of heat when it's a little cool on the outside at the beginning. The next sears will be a little different, but we'll talk about that. And then it'll go on a resting period. Now, the challenge I'm running into here, it's about 40 degrees. So it's going to rest real quick. So I'm going to be resting it off to the side in a cast iron pan that's on the other side of my grill here, just so it doesn't lose too much heat. And one thing I will mention is I wish my fire was a little hotter. I'm probably only at like 700 or 800 degrees. I'd like to be at like 1,000 to 1,200. The hotter, the better. But if you get it super hot, you'd see flames coming up. So hopefully we can get some flames going. But I'm on the second side here, so you can see the different technique. Brian's got it in the background there smoking. All this is going to really affect the flavors and the type of experience that you're going to have with the meat. But we really cook reverse. His steak, his cooking with what he's cooking right now, they're resting in the temperature that they're in. So they're all being cooked similar, but it's the reverse. It's a reverse style of it. Obviously, I'm taking, there's no smoke on my side here, but it's a resting game. And so really, for me, the key is to cooking proper meat and having it cooked. I mean, I look at stuff online, and I'm always polite to other people's food. I want to encourage people to cook things, and I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody at it. But I've had a lot more experience with it, and you as have you. But I see people that cook things so unevenly, and the reason things get cooked uneven is because you got to exude some patience, either with what you're doing with the smoking, and then the hot sear at the end, or what I'm doing here, where it's a hot sear at the beginning and throughout, and then there's just patient resting. So your patience comes throughout the whole process, and then you just go crazy at the end and drill it. And my patience comes in between.
Yeah, I tell you that when it's like I told you last year when we did this, I've never seen anybody cook a steak like that before. And to be honest with you, I haven't tried it yet either. I've been meaning to try and see if I can do that technique, because it's interesting. And I tell you, it turns out to be a delicious cut of meat when you're done with it.
One other thing I do too, I don't know if when we started the show, as Brian were on a little bit earlier, going through some of the issues we had with some technical issues. But Brian, talk about how you got your charcoal lit, because I think that's a really fascinating way. I do it completely different. I like the way you do it, but it's the way when you hear my technique, which you've seen before, it's the complete just let it go thing. Just again a little more on it. So explain your technique. How you got your lit.
Yeah, I've only seriously been, uh, I guess, taking grilling, this serious for maybe 4 or 5 years. So one thing I tend to do is I over research things, and then I start experimenting with every single technique out there. Obviously, I haven't done yours yet, but I watch a ton of YouTube channels, watch how different people cook their meat, how they grill it, if they just grill, if they smoke. I've done where you sear it first and then smoke it later. I've done cast iron. And to me, this technique, I love. Look, I know a lot of guys think cast iron is the way to go, but there's something about the taste of charcoal when you grill meat, and smoking it first and getting that smoke flavor in there, and then searing it off at the end. It's just became my favorite way of doing it after trying just about everything else.
When you said you'd only been taking it serious for 4 or 5, I thought you were about to say months, and I was like, wait a minute. I competed with you in October, which was like 4 or 5 months ago. So like after your victory, that's when you started taking it
I watched
serious?
a lot of videos before that. No,
I really started my passion. I grew up in the restaurant business. My family owned 3 restaurants. If anyone's watched some of the other social media things I've done this week, behind me there's been a road sign that says Mr. Mike's Family Restaurant. My dad started, he was a teacher and he hated it when he was in his late 20s and early 30s. So he started a roadside restaurant and did like ice cream, burgers, fries, Maine seafood. We actually have a secret family onion ring recipe that many people have tried to get, which my dad has very politely never told anybody. There are a few people that know it, that used to work for us, but we had restaurants. We had a pizza shop. We had a family dining restaurant that was casual and upscale at the same time. We had the seasonal dairy bar that was in the family for almost 35 years. That was called the Snack Shack. So I grew up working in restaurants. I mean, I started working when I was like 8 years old, bussing tables because my dad was annoyed with me that he had to work and I was sitting in the restaurant on Sunday night. So, hey, go bust some tables.
right.
So we started working and started cooking when I was probably 10. I started messing around a little bit. But when I got into like 12, 13, early teens is when I really started doing some things. I wasn't great. I could do burgers, fries, fried seafood, and things like that. But my steak really came on my love for steak and red meat really came on the last 4 or 5 years too, where I used to just throw it on the grill. And I was like, what happened was I got in the cigar business and we started going to some nice steakhouses. And I was like, okay, I can cook some of this stuff myself. And then I went to a few that were just over the top experiences. Doris Metropolitan being one of them. Bizarre Meat in Las Vegas. Jose Andres' cooking technique is I'm very inspired by that. Yeah. It's called tempered cooking. So I was like, wait a minute, I got to be able to do this stuff, and they're really transforming this product that I liked into something that I really loved. And then it was just naturally part of who I was growing up and what I did in college and out of college, and it was just a natural progression. And then providing this love to it, and the cigar industry really grew it for me. So it's about the same time frame with me on the red meat.
Yeah. Well, see, when I growing up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she cooked every night. And I think that's where I got my love for cooking. And my grandmother, my mom's mother, was my mom and my grandmother, 2 best cooks I've known. But the weekends were my dad and the grill. And that's where my love of steak came from. But just the love of cooking is, eating my mom's cooking. And when we go see my grandmother, she had chicken houses, lived out in East Texas. And she literally killed chickens in the morning. And by the time it was a 4-hour drive to get there. And by the time we got there, we had fried chicken and everything else ready to go. And it was just amazing. So that's my love of cooking came from my mom and my grandmother, and steaks and everything came from my dad.
So if anybody's wondering what I'm doing over here, I want to get a little more heat. So I'm bringing these coals down here. I'm taking the grates off, and I'm going to put the grill grates right directly on top of the coals. So I got one of the grill grates right directly on top of the coals. So we're going to cook on top of that because I'm not getting the heat I want here, but I will get it now. What was one of your favorite dishes that your mother made? You were talking about your mother and grandmother there. Like, what was something that
My
you
mom's
really remember
chicken
that you
fried
enjoyed?
steak was my grandmother's fried chicken and vegetables out of her garden. But my mom's chicken fried, anything she cooked was amazing. But I still, when I'm 51 years old, and when I have a birthday, I go to my mom's and I make her cook it for me.
One of my favorite dishes from my mother, who was watching, she came out to let me know a little bit ago that we were actually indeed live, which was a nice comforting thing. She used to make, and I'm sure there's people watching that used to do this, but it was just a really creative and fun dish. We used to take vegetables and hamburger and different meats and put them inside of aluminum foil, and you'd put like onions, hamburger, you could do broccoli, you put carrots, potatoes, and you just wrap it in a big ball. You put it in, and then you'd steam it in the oven. And that's like one of the dishes that was like a signature dish of my mother, but it kind of brought on to me taking, again, simple ingredients, not over season it, not going crazy.
Right.
And it's something I've remembered for 36 years of my life,
Right.
practically. Right. So it's a really, it's the simple, basic things, I think, as I said, that make eating special, make cooking special. If you just take great ingredients and don't butcher them and treat them the way they deserve to be treated, 9 times out of 10 and even more, you're going to have an incredible experience. And even some we're cooking crazy beefs right now. I mean, we got prime, dry aged, 70-day bone-in New York strip. You got Wagyu, tri-tip, Wagyu. This is great stuff. But I mean, we can do this with choice.
Oh yeah.
I can show you how to cook a regular steak choice, and that was part of the reason why I picked yak too, because yak, the marbling, as you go down with the USDA gradings, you've got prime, choice, and then select, and then the other ones like cutter, canner. That's stuff you wouldn't really ever eat. The majority of cutter goes into, I think it's cutter, it might be canner, but majority of that goes in like dog foods and stuff like that, and cat foods. It's good meat, but it's just not a lot of fat in it. But one of the reasons I picked yak is because a choice steak has more marbling than yak. Now the flavor profile is different, different animal, different diet, but you can still do these things with low marbling. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on meat to have a great experience, and you can treat that ingredient the way it deserves to be treated, regardless of the level of where it's at as well.
And I've seen people take steaks and they cover it in butter and every seasoning known to man, and then try to cook it, and it's like sometimes less is better. Keep it simple, stupid.
I'm not a huge fan of butter on steak whatsoever.
Yeah. If I do cast iron, I'll butter baste it, but for the most part, I don't. I'm not a big fan of compound butter on a steak either.
Butter is the same issue I have with pepper and garlic. Butter is an item at a high heat; it burns. And burned butter is disgusting. I just don't enjoy burned butter. By the way, I lowered this. Lowering the grates down onto the coals is awesome. You can see the smoke level coming up a lot better.
Have you seen those gaucho grills?
Yeah, they're amazing.
Man, I want one of those bad.
Yeah, necessity. I've been thinking about. So I spend my summers up in Maine, like the weekends and the times I'm not working, and that's where my family lives. Unfortunately, by the way, if I'm not going to move the computer around because I'm afraid that we might lose it, but it is absolutely gorgeous out here right now. Let me
I can see snow behind you there.
Look at the trees. It's like,
wow.
They're just covered, the pine trees.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous out. But so I spend my summers up here. Unfortunately, my parents, through part of my own doing, I like to think that they're both retired. My father will never retire, which I respect, but they never downsized in the house that they had that we grew up in, and we got a pool. It's beautiful property, and I spend my summers up here. And it's a great area because it's just in the middle of the woods, and I get to cook in the back, and it's just a perfect opportunity to enjoy this type of environment. So what's been happening here the last few weeks? Oh, hey, there he is. This is the big guy. what I've been doing here the last few weeks has just kind of been my routine of what I normally do when I'm home over the summers, minus the cold weather that's been around me. But the heat I'm getting off, I said the heat I'm getting off here right now is amazing. If the coals are white, it's excellent. And you can, I said, you can see a lot more smoke coming. Now, the thing with this is where you got to be really careful. Once you get real hot and you've got the temperature you need, the resting becomes very, very important.
Have you done the caveman cooking where you cook directly on the coals?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The with that, I caveman cook with lower quality ingredients. So if I were to take a choice steak, or I would take like you know, a top sirloin or something, that's where you're really trying to work a piece of meat that doesn't have a lot of flavor opportunity in it. Now, when I say flavor opportunity, I talk about fat marbling essentially. So you know, there's a quarantine grilling with McGee and Carney ism right there. The flavor opportunity. So
Flavor opportunity.
Yep. So flavor opportunity, caveman style is great for that kind of stuff. I wouldn't take a great cut of meat, because say you take this dry age and you throw it right on the coals, like directly on it, you're going to lose that funk. So the dry aging process breaks down the fat, draws it through the fibers of the muscle and the protein that you have, and it brings that flavor throughout it. And the easiest way to kill that is by butchering it with either one, a lot of seasoning, or two, so much heat or fire that actually causes to burn that off. So you don't really, you want to be careful with too much heat, and you also want to be careful with too much time on the heat. So I would say if you do the caveman style, which Brian mentioned, in my opinion, you would want to do like a lower grade of beef. Don't ruin something real high end on it.
I'm ready.
Have you?
Oh, I've done it once or twice, but not a lot.
Up in the Northeast, I think they call that Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So if you've seen over here off the side, I got my little mise en place set up over here. I've got some garlic. I got some prosciutto that we're going to use with my Brussels sprout dish. I've got some sliced Brussels sprouts. I like to slice them. It gets a little more surface coverage with the hot oil. We're going to do that in cast iron, but we're going to save that for just a little bit until we get these steaks going a little longer. I've got some shallots. I chopped those up to kind of a medium dice. I would say it's not tiny. It's a little inconsistent. I'm fine with inconsistent. One of the challenges I have up here is I don't have great knives, so some of the cuts are a little inconsistent. But all it is, you just can be a little more careful cooking it. The reason you want to cut consistently is so you're cooked evenly through different pieces. And then, like I said, I got two different kinds of Himalayan. I got some coarse ground and some fine ground, and then I got some lemons over here. And I got a little bit of Woodford Reserve. It was from a buddy of mine, gave it to me when I was a sales rep, Joe Petruzzi from Joe's Cigar Shop in Connecticut. He gave me this big bottle of Woodford. I'm not a big bourbon guy, but I cook with it. So we're going to be doing a little bourbon, bourbon glaze on top of those Brussels sprouts. So how's your temperature coming along there?
I am right at 300 on the nose. It's perfect.
What's the temp? Do you have probes inside the meat right now?
Just in the picanha, nothing else.
You know what I'm so ticked off about is that neither you or I are going to get to try each other's meat today.
I know, that's just what sucks.
Because I looked over there and I was like, oh man, I cannot wait to try that picanha. And I'm like, damn it, I'm not going to be able to get to. He's like 5,000 miles away. So you're a purveyor, the local yokel. They're in McKinney, correct?
They're in McKinney, yes. Old downtown McKinney. The other butcher I used to have as a sponsor, Matador, unfortunately he had to close. He was Matt Patterson, was a phenomenal butcher. Had everything I wanted there, but local is taking care of me. They hooked me up with for my meet and greets and stuff like that. And I use another one in Plano called Hirsch's. They've been around for like 35 years. Another great butcher in the Dallas area.
So I've got a spot up here. One of my grandmother's closest friends, her name's Jessie Barker. her grandson Errol has a butcher shop up here in Maine that I use quite a bit in the summer months, and he does a great job. And the one of the challenges up here in Maine, this is why I'm a big proponent of brick and mortar, obviously, being in the premium cigar business, and 90% of what I do, 90% plus of what I do is working with brick and mortar. But I'm the example of where I live is hard to get certain things that I want. So I live in northern Maine during the summer months, and that's where I am right now. And my town's got 3,500 people in it. And it's almost impossible to get prime beef from any of the meat purveyors in the area. And I prefer prime and also wild game. It would sound funny. It's like, oh, you're in the woods, so I can't just get wild game. One thing I'm going to tell you about living up here is I'm not a big hunter by any means. I'm also not around during hunting season. I've lived in Florida for, 16 years, 17 years now as well. So I'm never around for hunting season. But one thing I'll tell you, people who hunt very rarely give up what they captured.
Right.
Like I want moose meat. Good luck. My neighbor's got like probably 1,000 pounds. No way I'm getting my hands on any.
No
of
way
it.
you're getting any of it.
No. I had to find out for like 3 other people that he actually has it. So I'm going to put in for a moose permit this year with one of my friends. And we're going to try to get one. But I order from online. And the reason I do is because I have a hard time finding the places that I need when I'm up here in Maine. When I'm down in Miami, I do use meat purveyors locally down there. This is one, something Fork. I can't remember the full name of it, but Wild Fork. So I do buy from them down there. There's a new one that I just heard about. I can't remember the name, but I have it on my phone that I'm going to start buying from. So when I'm in areas, I do buy local. But if you see me ordering stuff shipped in, the reason is because generally when I'm in Maine, it's hard for me to get the stuff that I want. There's no Wagyu up here. There's no prime. I mean, first world problems, right?
Right. I'm gonna grab something out of the kitchen real quick.
So right now I'm in the middle of a resting phase. I'm touching. I will touch the meat. There's really, when I touch it, I can't tell you specifically what I'm looking for. Some people say if you take the portion in between your thumb and your pointer finger and you squeeze it tight, that's what like medium well is, or if you keep it open, that's what medium rare. Really, I've just been touching and feeling, cuts of beef since I was growing up, and I know exactly what medium rare is going to be like. So I just kind of feel it to make sure the texture on the outside's where I want it. I'm not too concerned about the inside because the resting is going to take care of that. But what I'm trying to do is eliminate that little gray line that you have on the outside. So if you see inconsistent cooking, so if you sous vide, which is a water bath essentially, sous vide cooks it very even throughout. The temper cooking method I'm doing should cook it this similar fashion, but the side of not the inside. So I'm feeling meat here. I'm feeling to make sure the outside's not getting too tough, and I'm also making sure that I got the crust that I want at the same time. But I'm ensuring and that touches to make sure that I'm not getting that thin little gray line. I guess we should come up with a name for that. We got the flavor opportunity. Somebody needs to take notes on this stuff. And
Right.
when I said this, I know my mother's going to write that down. So flavor opportunity is one. And then we got to come up with something for that little thin gray line. There might be some culinary term for it, but I don't know.
Yeah, the gray line is not good. All right, I got about, let's see here. I just had to little. So I'm at internal temp of 103 on the picanha.
123 inside already?
No,
103.
103. 103.
Beautiful. Now,
Yeah.
what temperature are you looking for with this right now? What
I want to stop it. I'm going to stop it. It's going to go off at about 127, and I'm going to let it rest, which will take it to about 130, 131, which will be perfect medium rare, and then I'll sear it. And the asparagus is on point right now.
Oh, so you're cooking some vegetables too, huh?
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
Trust me, everybody else caught it.
I know why I missed it. I was running my mouth more than likely. So Brian, you're retired U.S. Marine.
Yeah, I was
Correct?
in for. I was in when Desert Shield was turning into Desert Storm. Worked on F-18s, avionics, radar, weapons, communications on the FA-18 A, B, C, and D model. Never got to work on this Super Hornet.
I don't think I've ever done this, but to you personally, but thank you for your service, first of all, man. My grandfather was a Marine, and we take that very seriously in our family. So thank you for the service. But what you got to do is really freaking cool, though, because one of my dreams growing up was what I wanted to be a fighter pilot. But then I realized I had to go through boot camp and all this stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, like this isn't going to work. Then I wanted to be an actual like commercial airline pilot. And I was like, oh, I got to take all these math classes. This isn't going to work. So I stayed in the restaurant business.
Yeah, I had a good time. I loved it. Loved every minute of it.
How many years did you serve, Brian?
8. The only regret I have is I wish I would have stayed in reserves. I wish I would have maintained my reserve status. At the time when I was getting out, I got a job in the IT business and was going to be traveling quite a bit. And I just went ahead and just got out instead of, I just wish I would have stayed in reserves. That's the only thing I wish I would have done different.
So now we're over here on my end. I've got the steaks on their sides, getting a little bit more even cook. You can tell when they're starting, the juices are starting to come from the center of the meat out. The meat starts to get a little bit fatter. You'll see it kind of stick out like my stomach is right now. So it starts to get a little fatter, and you want to keep it that way because those juices are staying inside the meat. That's another thing about the hot cooking process. If you get the high temperature used, is going to sear that outside to a point where it captures the juices in, and if you don't overcook it, it won't puncture essentially the outside of the beef, and it'll keep those juices in. So it's very important to monitor that view. So a lot of people's like, well, how do you know when to do this? How do you know when to turn it, or how do you know when to take it off? You essentially are looking to take the meat and put it on the hot fire, and when it starts to get that little protrusion on each side and it starts to expand slightly, you know you're getting to a good point where you are almost ready to rest it, because you want the meat to then absorb the temperature and then reabsorb those juices.
All right, so now I got 5 minutes. I got my 5-minute warning going off. I'm gonna open these vents up a little bit, let the heat start building, so it'll be ready to sear here in about 10 minutes or so.
So the cigar I'm smoking is awesome. Not just because I blended it. By the way, I Tony and Lito put the tobacco in front of me and I just picked it. So it wasn't like a blending in-depth thing. So good ingredients, again, is a good example. Good ingredients make great things as long as you treat it properly. But I got 2 other ones I'm going to probably enjoy today. I got the TAA 50th second edition Oro. I wanted to grab a Crown Heads, but my Crown Heads are down in Miami at my humidor down there. I don't have any up here. And then I know Pete Johnson had mentioned a few times that he was interested in watching our show. I'm not sure if he's on or not, but I've been listening to him a few times on some different things this week. So he'd mentioned us doing the show, and then he'd actually messaged me and commented on one of my posts last week about how he's like, oh, you got to do something more with this. And I don't know if it was exact terms, but so I picked up a Tatuaje today that I'm going to probably smoke as well. It's one of the Monsters editions. I can't remember which one it is. I have some of each, but this is the one with the white label and the neon green lettering, which I'm not quite sure what it is. But I'm going to enjoy that later. So thank you, Pete, for watching and being interested in what Brian and I are doing. Yeah,
I smoked one of Pete's horses last night, and I smoked your one I showed you the other night. Was it 2008, 2007 Doble Corona?
Yeah, and that was the one with the actual LG logo on it. So that was a Dominican Puro. So the wrapper that I used on this was the same wrapper tobacco. Now that was probably in 2005 or 6. And there might even been a date on it, so I can't remember what the date was.
I think there was. I think there's a date on the box.
So that would be
you might be right. It might be 2006. I think you're right.
Yeah. So that would be the same tobacco that I have on this cigar. However, several generations after. So that was a unique find. When you pop that up, that was really impressive. Another thing that we don't have up in Maine, in the northern part of the state, is good wine. So I've been trying to not indulge too much in wine, because it's something I really love, and I don't want to indulge to the point where it's not something I can continue to love. But in the extended home time that we've had, the wine selection at my local Hannaford grocery store is quite challenging. So I'm drinking something and I have no idea what it is. I put it in a decanter to make it look special. But it's about the experience. So, people say, oh, this, it's about the people that you're with. You're with me. I really appreciate you and respect you, Brian. You are not enhancing this wine one bit.
Well, speaking of Pete, I got it in the kitchen. I got a Bordeaux from Saint Emilion that he would probably flip out over. I'll have to crack that open here pretty soon.
I also believe our friend Terrence Riley is on there. Yes, yeah. The Reverend Terrence Riley.
Reverend Olstein. He's got a church to close down first.
So Terrence is on there, and if there's anyone I missed, I know Jeff Greiner was joining us this evening. He was interested in this, and but if I missed you in the shout outs, I apologize. I'll try to do better next time. But I appreciate the people that appreciate us. And I said, even the ones I haven't been able to mention, those are the ones that I just noticed and shared and talked about some things in the last few minutes here when I jumped on Facebook. But anyone that's been fired up about my food posts, you drive me to do even more with it. I think it's maybe the same with you. Like, I even love feedback. Any positive or negative feedback's great. I don't get my panties in a bunch too much. Traditionally, I'm not wearing any. But go ahead.
Here's what I would like to discuss with you, because I get this all the time. The guys get upset that I don't use grill grates.
What do you mean you don't use grill grates?
Well, they get those special grates that sit up off the grill, and they actually put perfect grate lines, and then they got the 3-prong spatulas that pick it up and you rotate it 45 degrees.
I don't even know what that is. I mean, I know what a grill grate is, but the people, here's the thing. This is why I don't necessarily like competing. I like competing against you because it was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I knew that no matter how much trash either of us talked or joking around, nobody was going to get upset, and we were just going to have a great time, which we did. And I mean, most of the stuff I said, I meant, things I said about you, I really do mean it, but I mean it out of love. When I say suck it, McGee, I mean it. Like, I want you to deal with what I just threw at you. Like, I put a great statement. That's your problem. No, I'm not gonna get upset about it. This grill grate thing, if you're in competitive cooking, I guess if you're gonna have a perfect diamond grill mark and that's how you're gonna judge what a piece of meat is, I just don't think that's a good gauge. Like, I mean, I can do diamond grill marks in 2 seconds. I was doing diamond grill marks when I was 10.
They say it keeps the flare-ups from touching the meat. So the way I cook, doing it like this, when I'm ready to sear, I want as much fire on that meat as possible because I want the entire steak to sear, not just the grill mark part of
it. And what we were talking about earlier, when I mentioned I'm trying to capture those juices in, if you're trying to protect the integrity of the beef, and the best way to do it is to create a protective layer of sear over the outside that holds the moisture in. One of the biggest comments that I have with some of the steaks I cook, whether it's dry aged or it's non-dry aged, is I'll cut it open after it's been on its rest, and people will say, "Why? Where's the juice? Where did it go?" It's inside the meat.
It's inside, yeah.
Because I let it rest, and I also didn't let it escape. So there's no flare-ups. There's no this. There's no that.
I mean, look at the mahogany on this hamburger.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, that's perfect.
Speaking of grill marks, so that's a serious grill mark. Like you're
Yeah.
telling me you want that, you're going to get a better grill mark out of a burger on that little device you talked about than what you got
Yeah.
there? That's amazing. All right. We're getting in pretty good shape here. I'm going to go on with another sear. The yak's going to sit for a bit. It's a thin cut. I don't want it to overcook.
All right.
But on my dry age ribeye right now, I'm on the flat sides. What do you got there? That's the, oh my gosh.
That's the picanha.
That
so
is
now I'm just going to let it
ridiculous.
rest, and then I'm going to sear it off.
Beautiful. So I started ordering, I don't know if you've been around for this yet. The last few times I've been to Texas, I've started ordering for cigar shops when I'm in them. I've been ordering Texas Day Brazil on Uber Eats.
Right.
So when you go to Texas Day Brazil, or you go to those churrascarias, one of the most annoying things is that you don't get the meat you want when you want it. So you got to wait for them to come around. I know it's part of the dining experience, but when you order on Uber Eats, they sell it by the pound. So you pick exactly what you want. So if you want the picanha guy to come around, you just order a couple pounds of picanha, they put it in a to-go container and deliver it to you. So I've started doing Brazilian churrascarias on Uber Eats and Grubhub. It's amazing. So if you're looking for a steakhouse experience and you want the Brazilian style, I said the churrascarias, the Uber Eats and Grubhub, even more fitting now, is incredible. You can get the cheese bun, the little cheese rolls. You don't have to sit there and wait for you don't have to say no to chicken 10 times before they bring by the picanha.
Here you go. This is for all the vegan jokes. Some smoked asparagus. It's amazing.
Beautiful. All right, so I got my yak over here resting. That's going to get some heat here at the end. I'm going to get...
Every time you say yak, I think of Ren and Snippy.
So, Brian, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to have to connect. I was going to do all coal here the whole time. Not the steaks are going to stay on the coal. But I was going to put my cast iron on the coal tops and do my Brussels sprouts. So I didn't even connect my propane on the side. I got a little burner. But this coal, I got this new coal. It's nice. I like it. But it's a lump charcoal. It's called Bayou Classic Natural High Density Hardwood. I usually use the Royal Kingsford. Not the Royal Kingsford, the red bag. It's called Royal.
Oh, the Royal Oak.
Yeah, Royal Oak. I generally use Royal Oak, but it's off season up here, so we don't have Royal Oak. So I got this one. Anyway, it's nice. It's just breaking down incredibly fast.
Yeah, B&B Royal Oak tend to be the best.
Yeah, so it's really good, but generally I wouldn't have to go straight on to the heat like that. So I'm going to have to plug some propane in here so I can get this cast iron going for the Brussels sprouts. If I explode, you better carry this show on, Brian, without me, all right?
I'll give some helpful steak tips. Common newbie errors that a lot of people make when cooking steaks or any kind of protein, really.
That's a great segment, by the way. Steak tips.
The first steak. There you go. The first lesson I learned was letting your proteins, especially steaks, come to room temperature before you put them on the grill. A lot of people take them right out of the refrigerator, put them on the grill, and you don't get a good sear that way. You've got to let them come to room temperature, make sure they're dry, pat them dry with paper towels, and then put them on the grill, and you'll get a perfect sear and a better cook that way, a better crust.
Well, I got a tip for everybody. This just shows you how opposite we are. If you cook the way I'm cooking, you can take your steak directly out of the fridge and put it directly on the flames to get the sear you want.
Perfect.
But I do agree with Brian with the technique he's using and a general technique you would use if you're not used to doing what I'm doing. By the way, these steaks could come out awful. I don't know. I hope knock on wood, they come out great. But generally, as a rule of thumb, that is a great philosophy on that. You do want to give it some resting period prior to it as well.
Yeah, you gotta let it rest. You gotta let it
Yeah.
rest when you're done cooking it.
And that's the key with everything. Resting is huge. Chicken, people overcook chicken so much. They're like, oh, sous vide's so great because you make great chicken. Another great way to make great chicken is to know how to cook chicken.
Right.
So if chicken can rest, you don't bring it up to 165 and let it go to 180, 190. Like I cooked some Cornish game hen yesterday and I brought it up to about 155 and I let it rest for about 10 minutes and it went up to 165 in that period of time, which put it in the safe food zone, and it was fantastic. So resting in any part of the process is huge. And essentially what you've been doing right now, your meat's been resting just in higher, in a higher temperature than room temperature. The smoking process is a resting process in itself.
Yeah, and another thing, when you let it rest, don't let it rest in its own juices. Put it on a cooling grate and elevate it so when as everything drips off of it, it doesn't ruin your crust either.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. So I'm about to sear this bad boy. We're gonna get some flames. Watch out now. Watch out. This should be a pretty good fire show, especially with us add on here. All right, so this is now internal temp is right at 130. So I'm done cooking it. So now I'm just gonna. As soon as that fat hits the coals, it's gonna.
Man, you got that going real well.
Yeah.
I've started my Brussels sprouts here. I got the cast iron on here. One of the questions people ask is how do you season your cast iron pan? If it's brand new, you take some olive oil or avocado oil, whatever oil you want. I like olive oil because I like the flavor. Grapeseed oil has a lower smoke point, so it can take more temperature and more heat. So sometimes I'll use grapeseed oil in my house. But the best way to season your pan, your cast iron pan, is to, for me, I never wash it. Unless it gets grotesque. I'll scrape it off, but I don't ever give it soap. I never soap it. So the cast iron that I've got is just straight up, very rarely gets washed. And I'll just, if I use it too many times, I don't let the oil on it turn into black. I don't let gunk or tar build up. But the best thing to do is to just water and wash the thing. So yeah, the Brussels sprouts I got going here. I got the oil heating up. If you can see it from here, you can see it smoking a little bit. I was going to do white wine today. I drank it all apparently. I don't drink a lot of white wine, so I'm not sure where it went. I must have used it. But we're going to do bourbon today. So the bourbon is going to go on probably in between. The first thing I'm going to put in is going to be the shallots. One thing I do like the taste of is crispy up onions. So we're going to put the shallots in here first. It's going to get a good sizzle going. You can hear it in the background. One thing you can use here are chopsticks. Chopsticks are a great thing to cook with. I'm going to use a spoon because I'm in Maine. I don't have chopsticks up here. But I'm going to get those onions going. After the onions go in, I'm going to put the prosciutto in because I like some tough prosciutto, like a little kicked up. So the onions are already cooking a bit. So the prosciutto is going to go in next. I dump it in. And then before the prosciutto gets cooked up too much and before the shallots get too crispy, we're going to throw in the actual Brussels sprouts to go with it. And then on top of the Brussels sprouts, we're going to put a little bourbon in. We want to make sure we cook the alcohol out. And then I'll add lemon and salt after. And I'll add the garlic in at the end because I told you I don't like burnt garlic. Yeah, the bourbon smells great.
All right.
How you doing over there, Brian?
All right, let's check out the. I don't know if this will come through. Here's the sear on the picanha.
Oh yeah, I can see it. Perfect. Beautiful. How'd you get it all the way around? What did you do to get it all the way around? Because that's a complete sear.
Yeah, I just keep rotating and moving it on all sides.
I'm adding a little lemon juice right now. We're gonna put a little lemon zest in here as well. Lemon zest is really where, if anybody's into essential oils, lemon zest and
Oh man.
that's where the oils come from, is from the rind. So we're gonna do a little lemon zest at the end on top to give it a little more flavor. What else? What'd you just pull off?
I've got oh, where's my two German shepherds down here trying to.
Awesome. Our first guest on the show, Brian.
Yeah, they're definitely eyeing all the meat candy.
Do you ever feed them any of this high-end stuff?
Actually, you know what? I do have them on half dry, half raw diet. They get a lot of good fish, raw fish. I feed them.
I've seen some dogs that get some really great diets. There was these dogs that a girl I was dating babysits in last year, and she babysits the dogs and house sits the dogs. And one of the unique things about those dogs were they ate incredible, because they would go, the owner would make them like gourmet meals, but he'd go and pick out like choice steaks, or like anything that was on special, any of the manager's specials at the grocery store. So these dogs were eating amazing. And again, my friend Joe Petruzzi as well, I've mentioned him a couple times. He's an Italian guy, and he's big into cooking. He cooks some great stuff. His dogs, he raises German Shepherds. And that's what made me think of yours, is Joe's dogs eat like freaking kings. What'd you just try there?
The Wagyu hamburger.
How is it?
So good.
Smoking ground beef is incredible. The flavor just gets through it so well.
I'll give this another helpful hint is always cutting against the grain. I'll cut this up here in a minute when it's rested. And
explain to our audience here what the grain is and how you determine it, because I think that's one of the more common questions that I hear out there. Is
when you look
how
at
do you identify the grain?
Showed the marbling earlier, you saw the grain of the meat, the way it flows through the cut. So if the grain's going this way, you want to cut it against it this way, because if you don't, you'll have it just makes it tougher and harder to chew. Cut, especially like skirt steak, picanha, tri-tip. You definitely want to cut against the grain, against those, because they're already they're not the most tender.
And these Brussels sprouts with the bourbon, I'll be honest, it's the first time I've ever done Brussels sprouts with bourbon. So nobody knows what's going on here. I was talking about the Brussels sprouts bourbon. I just had a guest come out here because one, they enhanced my lighting, and the second, I didn't have a pet and they felt bad for me, so they brought me out a pet. The pet that I have is my pet stuffed gorilla from when I was a child.
Nice.
So our gorilla friend is here with us. So, I mean, they're not German Shepherds, but he is a gorilla.
Harambe?
Harambe for life.
Right.
So I'm sitting here around the corner, and the gorilla gets set down. I'm like what? My mom goes, She goes, so I want you to have a pet. She goes, Brian's got two. And I was like, okay, well now I have a pet out here. All right. So one thing you're going to notice with my steaks is I'm not a big grill mark fan. There's no grill marks. You'll see some grill spots.
Right.
I got it there, and that's what it's about.
It's got a crust though, and that's perfect.
And then the yak is still fat, so it's still got some motion in there. It's still got a little bit of give to it. It should be pretty medium rare. They're on the final rest right now. These are going to get cut up.
Let me put some of this up. No, quit looking.
I like to, when I use lemon too, I like to put lemon in at the beginning because I want it to get it into it. I also, citrus helps cut and works with fat real well. So it's good to add some a little bit at the end too. Right here, I got olive oil in here. I got prosciutto. So there's some fatty items that are in there. And so there's gonna be some rendered fat. So I like to add lemon at the end as well as at the beginning, just to give it a little bit more taste and a little bit more balance. I'm going to take a picture. It's going to be hard to see on the screen. I'm going to take a picture of my phone of these Brussels sprouts right now, and I'll post it a little bit later. It's got a real good look to it.
Let's see if I can't cut this up here on camera. Turn.
So we're not quite done here, but we are. We're getting to the end of the cooking process. We're going to start enjoying here. We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. For those viewers watching, right now it's on Facebook Live. I tried to do YouTube for those that don't have Facebook. For those that don't have Facebook, I commend you. It's one of the the biggest evils in the world, on top of one of the best ways to stay in touch with people. But today we're Facebook Live. I did submit for YouTube. So Brian and I will be doing another show. We've got another 15, 20 minutes or so here. But we will be doing another show to be determined, hopefully next Monday, maybe before. We'll see what we do. But we are going to be having some guests on as well. If anyone's interested in being a guest, the requirement is to be cooking something while you're on the show. We will be taking guest requests if somebody would like to join us on the quarantine grilling. If this goes beyond quarantine, one of our sponsors, the Wood Butcher, has offered to maybe take over some of the naming rights. So we may do something like that. But we will have more shows. I believe Fred Rui, formerly of Nomad Cigars, the founder of Nomad. I got that right? Yeah.
I don't know if
That's beautiful.
If the red's coming through, but that is perfect medium rare. Oh.
So Fred will be joining us on our next show. He's from Orlando. That's where I went to college and lived for about 12 to 13 years. So that's like my home away from home as well. So Fred will be joining us on the next show. His first, I guess you'd say his tryout was an Egg McMuffin.
Yeah, that was.
So
and if he tries to cook a McRib, we're kicking him out.
Yeah. So if the guest we're going to know real quick. We don't pull any punches here. If you come on and you're a guest and you're not bringing an A game, you can go right back to being a viewer of the show real quick. But yeah, we will be having some guests. I'd like to keep doing this, but the reason I bring this up is because after the show today, I will be posting the link for this viewing on Facebook for the Zoom. So for people who have Zoom and they'd like to come in and talk to Brian and I, when we do finally end the show on live Facebook, we will do a private room, and that'll be kind of like our dessert room and cigar lounge, and the enjoyment where we'll be eating and kind of hanging out for a little bit. So if anybody would like to join Brian and I after, I will be posting that link immediately on Facebook, and that will get you right into our room. We won't get it out of control. Said no politics. If you want to come in, we're going to talk about beef. We're going to talk about cigars a little bit, but it's about beef. So you're eating over here and you're making some noises, which I really like. What's going on?
This is freaking amazing.
So is that the picanha or the tri-tip?
Picanha. Man, that's good. Sorry.
All right. So the sprouts are done. One thing you'll notice when I post this picture of the sprouts online, if you're listening, watching, you see it's kind of like a sprout hash. When you cut it up and you slice them thin, unless you're deep frying them, when you do a cast iron pan, it really reduces the size of it, and if it turns into like a Brussels sprout hash, it's just an incredible accompaniment to anything. And this is something too, like the leftover here. You could turn some of these leftover veggies into breakfast, and you could turn the leftover steak into breakfast.
Perfect in an omelet in the morning.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking right here. I cleared out some spot to put the in the middle. I put the Brussels sprouts to the outside just so they could stay warm, but to come off the flame a little bit of the pan. And I was like, man, I could just dump a fried egg right in the middle of that thing right now. It'd be incredible.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
All right, so I think I'm ready to cut into the yak, Brian.
All right.
I've got a different board here from Wood Butcher. I got one that's going to really a lighter board so people can see the contrast, the colors. So here's the yak. This is the finished yak. It's real dark on here, but it's got a good crust on the outside. This is the one I'm the most curious about and the most concerned about. The reason I'm concerned is it's wild game, and I was cooking it on some hot charcoal, so I know I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with the end result here. So let's see. Yeah, before I cut into that, let me do a little lemon zest on top of this Brussels sprouts here. One thing you want to do too, whenever you're cooking something, other chefs will tell you this, or anyone, do this at home. Whenever you're cooking something that's not like, if you cut into a steak in the middle of it to check what's going on, you already screwed your steak up. But when you're cooking something else, taste it. When you add ingredients, taste it. These Brussels sprouts are ridiculous.
Yeah.
The shallots and the prosciutto with the bourbon, it kind of glazed them. So it's like this is breakfast food for me. This is incredible. Wow. Man. All right, so let me a little lemon zest on top. Then we'll cut into that yak, give what the people have been waiting for. For the people.
For the people.
So as I said, that lemon zest where you're going to get a lot of that oil from, that essential oil, and you're going to get a really rich lemon flavor from it. And it's not like that citrus lemon taste. It's if you take the acid out of the lemon and you have that taste, that's what you're going to get from the lemon zest. So let me wipe this down here. I'm going to get a picture of these before I cut into them. So we'll do a before and an after shot. Now I switched over to a different board than what I was resting on. The resting board I had has a little juice well on the outside of it, so I put it on there.
But that's the pecan you cut up and ready to go.
Oh wow, beautiful. All right, here goes yak first. Yakety yak.
Yakety yak.
Don't talk back. Oh, wow. So the knife I'm using is this cheap knife that my family's had for a really long time. And it doesn't get used that often. And I found it last summer. It's got this little wooden handle to it. And I just sharpen it on my own. It's just an awesome knife. I just use a regular little sharpener, and the thing stays really sharp, better than any of the little chef knives we have. And it's my preferred knife. I also love it, which I'm probably, giving a little too much information on this. Because it'll now probably get used. I'm the only one that actually uses it and realizes it's the sharpest knife that we have. Now, Brian, what just happened here is beautiful. So I'm going to lay this beef out here. I'm going to lay it upside down. Very little gray line, a little more than I wanted on the yak, but pretty good because it's like a reddish gray line. A little bit more than I wanted, but let me hit it with a little bit of coarse salt. With the coarse salt, and then let's get a shot here for the gram. Phone eats first. All right, we got yak. Here's the yak.
Oh, dude, perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm real happy with it. I'm gonna try a piece of that right now. Now this is gonna be.
Big fan of Dow Strong knives.
Mm-hmm.
Great knives for the money.
Man, so I cooked some yak the other day. I did a ribeye, cast iron, awesome. Then I took a yak strip and I put it on my grill. Not the grill that I have out here now. This is my summer grill. I drug this through the snow this morning out front here. But the little propane grill, I cooked the yak on the propane. I didn't like it at all. This just shows you when you treat the meat properly, what you get for a finished product. This yak strip today is killer. It's a completely different product than what I cooked the other day. All right, man, it's good. It's not super gamey. It's not gamey at all. It's not tough. It's got more give. Now we're going to go into this New York strip. This is what puts the asses in the seats. Epicania was ridiculous, by the way. I'm incredibly
jealous.
This
right here. This is the money shot. Now is that a bone-in strip?
Bone-in New York strip. Yep.
Oh, perfect.
And we're in business. All right, I'm going to cut it in half for bragging rights. Oof. Beautiful. So this today, the cool thing about dry age beef is when you cut it, and if you let it rest properly, it kind of looks, it's not like red. The inside of it's not red. It's like pinkish and light, and the color expands. So here you go. This is perfectly cooked.
That's amazing.
70-day dry age strip, edge to edge. So Brian and I accomplished the same thing in about the same amount of time with two very, very different cooking techniques.
I'm gonna put half of this picanha in the mail and put half of that steak in the mail. We'll trade.
Yeah, I'm down, honestly. If this problem is this might not make it past the living room when I get inside. No. I got a hungry growing man inside who had hip replacements at the end of last year, and he's revived new mobility. So I don't know. This might not make it, Ryan. I haven't tried it yet. See, I'm gonna give a shot of the whole steak here.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. We did the same thing two totally different ways.
Absolutely. There we go.
Oh, dear God.
So let's go for a bite. Oh man. So the 70-day strip, New York strip is my favorite. I love ribeye, ton of fat, awesome. But I like the in-between. New York strip is an in-between meat, in-between cut. It's got a combination of fat, but not as much as ribeye. And I really like the consistency and texture of it. So the dry age strips for me are my favorites. Dry age fillets are my least favorite, just not enough fat in it. But dry age strip is enough.
Dry age strip is perfect. So when it comes, I get a lot of the dry age bags, the umami bags, and do a lot of dry aging myself. and I do about average about 35 days. Is there a sweet spot for you that you like time wise?
30 is the minimum, in my
Right.
opinion. This is ridiculous, by the way. For anyone that's watching, that's within 20 feet of me, they should come outside and try this. Ridiculous. My dad doesn't even like medium rare, and he's going to love this. He loves the dry age stuff because it's not super. It's not, you know, it's not blood, but it's not bloody.
Right.
It doesn't appear that way, and the texture of dry age is nice. Yeah, it's incredible. I prefer minimum 30-day. 50 is my favorite.
That's your sweet spot.
That's my sweet spot. 50 is where it really starts to hit for me. I've had 90. I've had 120. I don't mind funk, but at 90 it gets a little funky. Above that it gets a little more funky. By funky I mean like mushroom, like a
You get that real earthy.
real earthy. I would say like a truffle-y taste.
Right.
As you really get that as it gets older. But 50 for me is really a sweet spot. 70 is incredible. Come on over and try. Yeah, come in. Someone's too shy to come in. She's too shy to come in and see and try these, but she's not too shy to give me a gorilla. All right, come try it. Come in. They want to see you. The people need you. They can hear you. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Delicious.
Incredible, right? Yeah.
Delicious.
But yeah, 50 days my sweet spot. Anything below 30. 28 days is minimum because that's what, like, what's that, 4 weeks?
Right. Have you done it yourself? Do you use the dry age bags or those umai bags?
I haven't used the bags before because but I have dry aged. I dry aged in my refrigerator in Miami, and the reason I dry age in my refrigerator is because when you're dry aging, you want to keep the humidity low, so you need a fan that's constantly going. So in Miami, it's humid, so my refrigerator is always on. Also, I travel, so my refrigerator never has anything in it. So I've dry aged.
You don't need to cover it up.
You don't need to do anything.
Right.
So I've dry aged in there. The longest I could go without eating it was 35 days. I just ate a piece off the bone, Brian.
Oh, that bone. Whew.
Ridiculous. So out of what you cooked, what's your favorite?
What do you mean?
I know it's hard to guess, but out of the items you cooked today, what was the dish that impressed you the most?
Down.
Yep.
That picanha. I tell you, once I might have discovered picanha and tri-tip a year and a half ago. Had no clue what those cuts were, and they've quickly become two of my favorite cuts. I mean, they're just amazing flavor-wise. They're so different too. They're unique, different flavors. One thing I want to do is get it like a porterhouse roast and dry age a whole roast. I'm thinking about doing it for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, dry aging primal cuts is the way to go because then you can cut them how you want, and that's a lot easier to deal with, and you kind of set it and forget it. The issue I did with when I dry aged, I did like 3 or 4 pound roast. So by the time you're done with it, you're very little meat because you're going to lose at about 30 days. You're losing about probably 20% of the weight.
Yeah, you lose.
The longer you're losing a lot.
I would definitely want to try a dry aged brisket. Do a brisket for 60 days.
This bone-in strip is the bone-in strip with this cheap wine I'm drinking. the nice cigar that I have. Staring at the pine trees covered in snow is one of the most beautiful things I've ever done in my life right now. This is just amazing. So I cooked, as I said, 70-day prime dry aged bone-in New York strip. I cooked yak New York strip, which is delicious. Simple methods, high heat, not a lot of ingredients, treating ingredients the way they deserve to be treated, cooking them properly, not overcooking, consistency of cooking edge to edge with heat.
Yeah.
Brian did his in the reverse style, coming out with similar results, different flavor profiles. I wish I could try it. But I think this was certainly a success. And
I'll
big
post a
win.
picture of this picanha so you can see how perfect medium rare it is, because it didn't come through on the camera.
Yeah, it's tough to see. And that's just, I took a bunch of shots too, so we'll be posting some pictures later. But we're coming around to 6:30. We're at about an hour and a half now. I'm going to post on my Facebook. I'll tag Brian in it. Just give me about 2 or 3 minutes. I'll post the link to the Zoom page where we'll be doing the lounge here after. But I'll be posting that in just a bit. As I said, this is our inaugural show. We have plenty planned. Our next show will feature Fred Rui. I'm not sure what days he has available, but I do know Orange County is on stay-at-home order, so he should be available 24/7.
Right.
Fred
Not
Rui
like
will
he's
be our
working
next
or
guest.
anything.
Yeah. I think he's retired. Right now. But Fred Rui will be our guest on our next episode of this. Stay tuned for that. Brian, it's an honor. It's a pleasure. I know we're going to be hanging out after this.
Always enjoyed it.
But this was great. I hope this showed some people kind of what our passion is outside of cigars and working. I hope there's some things that you learn. I look forward to other people's techniques and ideas. The only thing is, if you're going to give Brian and I any advice on how to cook steak, just realize we just cooked about 6 different cuts of steak. Brian's got a championship belt, but we just cooked 6 cuts of steak perfect from edge to edge. So if you can do better than that, I'll take your advice. If not, we appreciate you attending and I appreciate you joining the show with us.
Thank you very much, man. That was awesome.
So we'll leave you with our theme song. This may be illegal on Facebook Live, and it's going through my headpiece here. But thank you for joining Quarantine Grilling with McGee and Carney. We'll see you next time. In the meantime, the champ says goodbye. And I say thank you. And it was a pleasure having you all on here tonight. Now I got to figure out how to go off from live.
Right. So we just end the meeting?
Stop live stream.